The problem is not forming new institutions. It is in our hearts. The president's body language, his temperament and his attitude is not geared towards fighting corruption. And Martin Amidu was right that he's the mother serpent of corruption.
Is that not an unfair assessment?
There is no way. It is a very fair assessment. Look at who he appointed as head of Public Procurement Authority. The person who was appointed as head of Public Procurement Authority to begin with had ethical challenges under the Kufuor administration. So it was not like people didn't know who he was, but he got the job anyway. Then the president, of course, along the lines you're talking about, says, oh, this time we even have a minister for public procurement. Not only that, we have a board of directors of the Public Procurement Authority. In spite of that, the head of Public Procurement Authority forms a private company on the side that bids for contracts and gets them and sells them on the side. And he did that for years under the very noses of his board of directors and the minister who was supposed to take care of public procurement. And then all what it took was Manasseh Azuria, one journalist, to expose that. So where was the security agencies? Where was the police? Where was the Attorney General's department? Where was anybody?
Now,
so the idea that this government is interested in fighting corruption is a joke. Everybody knows that is not true. And Professor Frimpong Boateng's claims in the interview that I refer to in my piece is a very solid backing of what I'm talking about.
But, Doc, you know that those are claims, untested, unverified, and claims that have not been subjected to the litmus test of a judicial process. Would it be fair to base your assessment partly on even that?
Yes, it is. Remember why? Because one, the professor in the interview produced letters that were exchanged between him and the Minister of Finance. He says that the Minister of Finance wrote to him. He said that he confronted the Minister of Finance. Not only that, he said that contemporaneously, when he found out that they were trying to loot our country of 88 million, he was so shocked that he told the president about it. Until this interview, have you heard the president do anything about it? Nothing.
Nothing has come to the public domain about it here. I've not read anything on the president's action related to this.
Precisely, and not only that, think about it. If this was just one, what do they call it, settlement under the Judgment Debt Act, which means now the government doesn't go to court. How many of these do you think happened under this government? One a year? If it is one a year, we're talking about almost $1 billion US. And think about it, just so for context, President Biden is in trouble here because Americans think he and his extended family actually received bribes worth about 20 million over an 8-year period as vice president. Look at Americans' reaction to that and look at our reaction to this.
But what could we do differently? Be on the streets, protest, speak up about it?
Indeed. Why not? But let me tell you.
But we've done that. There's been 2 major protests recently, really.
There should be more. And I say, if there is going to be no justice as well, let there be no peace. You know, for example, this thing that we are talking about, you say, what could have been done? You know, we all sit there in this country and we talk about how, oh, we all want a better country. We can't get leaders. And Frimpong Boateng steps up and he says, yes, indeed, they were stealing 82 million or something. I said no, and they tried to bribe me with $5 million. And for almost a week, this is the first time that following my opinion piece, a media house is trying to do anything about it. Aren't you surprised? Not even the opposition seems to be interested in it. Where is the Office of Special Prosecutor who labeled himself conscience of the country?
Except to say that the last time Professor Frimpong Boateng put together a list of wrongs in government in that Galamsey report, the Attorney General basically rubbished that particular report and said there was nothing to move forward with it.
Because The Attorney General is not fighting corruption. He is protecting the corrupt. He is in the vanguard of the protection brigade for the Achim Mafia and its allied forces. This is not fighting corruption. Who doesn't know Joy FM, to your credit, with, I think, Erasmus Asarodongo, have done very powerful documentaries that showed right in the bushes our forests being destroyed, our river bodies being destroyed. And this report shows soldiers protecting people who were doing galamsey. You didn't even need Professor Frimpong Boateng's report. The evidence is sitting right in front of us. We see all this. Excavators, what happened to the excavators? And if anybody was ever in doubt, they can look at the drinking water. So who do they think is making the drinking water dirty? What happened to the Chinese who were arrested? Why are there more Chinese on the road from Kumasi to Obuasi than perhaps any other place? Why is it that South Africa has made so much of its mines and we can't do anything? Why is it that even when the galamsey ban was enforced, we exported so much gold? And actually, the irony is that when they looked at Ghana's data about how much gold we exported and what Switzerland reported, Switzerland showed that we reported 1 billion more gold than we claimed here on the spot. It is obvious that the looting is going on right in front of our very eyes and our nation is being torn apart.
Is this new? Is this fresh? Is this an Akufo-Addo problem, or is just coming to a watershed now?
Oh, it's coming to a watershed now. Of course, there has always been corruption in Ghana's history. And to those who don't know, actually, the Nkrumah government almost collapsed before independence because of some cocoa marketing money, and Ohinijan had to go to prison for that. So corruption has always been with us. General Ankara had to resign as head of state because of corruption. And of course, General Champon and Fautobeji Gulf and all those things earned their own place in history. Professor Buzia once said the biggest problem in this country's history is corruption, and he lamented that if he had 5 honest people, he would transform the country. It has always been with us, even there was some under Rawlings. But Nana Akufo-Addo and his team have taken it to a new level. And if we do not check this, they are blowing past every boundary. And we see all this around us. Young men and women get into government who are penniless. And then within a few years, they are building mansions and nobody asks them anything. We say we declare assets. Nobody checks the declaration of assets. You know, we were talking about this question you asked me about, is there evidence? Remember when people started saying the judiciary was corrupt and they started talking about who has evidence and bring evidence, until Anna showed his video and we found out that they were taking money and plantains and women and other gifts in order to give judgments. Didn't we see that? Since then, what has happened? The same thing happened under Mills. They did customs and excise, and we saw a lot of corruption. Until we have our fingers around corruption, nothing will work in Ghana. We got $3 billion in COVID aid, and people decided in a modern country that to distribute the COVID aid, they will use party functionaries. When we have local government, we have Ministry of Health, and the money just disappeared. Nobody has asked anything. For COVID, Frontiers Health got a contract even before it was a registered company in Ghana and got millions of dollars. And when the ministers who are responsible for this went for their appointments to be renewed, Parliament just looked the other way and couldn't demand accountability.
Those are interesting perspectives you bring to this one. So you say we should wrap our hands around this. How then do we deal with the specific issue of corruption then? It appears government is not winning the fight, and governments over the years have also not been winning this fight. What will be the magic wand to deal with corruption in the Republic of Ghana? At least starting with this government.
An aroused and angry public. when you say this government is fighting corruption and losing, you are actually giving them a lot of credit. This government is not fighting corruption. It is in the vanguard of corruption. The main source of corruption in our society is the government, because they are supposed to enforce the laws. So for now, there are a lot of places where corruption could be fought. For example, if we woke up when we had an office of special prosecutor who looked to history instead of to the Chebi Mafia for guidance, we would see some things happening. If we looked at Parliament and they were inclined to, in effect, do something about corruption, they could start asking questions. But even Parliament, when MPs decided that they didn't want Ken Ofori-Atta, somebody walked onto the floor of Parliament with money to try and bribe them. Have we heard anything about that?
No, there's not been any update on that. They said they were investigating the matter.
Of course. They will investigate it till the end of this government.
Now I get your... No, you are making an example. Sorry, I think we're losing connection. But okay, you are making an example. You said they would investigate it to the end of the matter. But I didn't hear the next thing you said after that.
And they will do nothing about it. They are just running out the clock. They are not interested in finding the culprits because the people we are relying on to stop the stealing and the thieves are the same people.
Sorry, are the same people doing what?
The people who are doing the stealing and the people the Ghanaian public is relying on to stop the stealing are the same people.
Oh, okay. So okay. So that's actually what you meant by that. Now, there is the connective part. You said that an angry society that rises up to it is part of it. But as I referenced earlier, we've had people complaining in this country. We've had people actually going on demonstrations and doing a lot more. You seem to suggest, if we move it a little bit further, that the media, civil society organizations, and religious leaders are staying silent on these issues. Is it possible there are other reasons not captured in your letter for their response or lack of response?
Oh, they are staying silent. I mean, after Frimpong Boaten's revelations, during the time of Unigov and others, when I was a student leader, most of the purpose who have thundered with denunciations of the government and the corrupt people. Who did this? Did you hear anything? Did you hear anything said by TUC or professional bodies or anybody? Nobody said anything. But the reason why I keep referring to the public is, remember when the president decided that his wife and the wife of the vice president deserve salaries? They were shamed into returning the money. Angry, aroused public, do something. And I'm also saying that all of us who get up every morning and say, oh, we want honest governments, we want honest leaders. When people like Frimpong Boaten and the corrupt cabal is cutting them down, we need to stand up for them and say, we appreciate what you are doing and go on. This is what Ghana needs. But if we allow people like that to be destroyed in front of our eyes, young people will learn that it does not pay to stand up for our country.
That's an interesting point. You, in your statement, appear to long for the days of certain past leaders and a more active, activist civil society. However, those things also were marked by some challenges too. In what ways is the current situation fundamentally worse than what we have experienced in times past?
The quantum leap of corruption.
Oh, okay.
We tend to where people used to be embarrassed to be corrupt. Now they are not embarrassed anymore. People used to hide the stolen loot. Now they put it in front of everybody. It is as if they think there can be no retribution. So they are looking for money and there are no apologies about it. And actually, I am putting a theory on the table. The reason why this government has failed is that it is not because there have not been good policy ideas. There have been good policy ideas. But my theory is that whatever idea you put on the table in front of this government, some people will decide how to milk it for their private purposes before the policy is implemented. So in the end, the milking becomes a bigger priority than the public interest.
Are there examples to back this theory?
Oh, an obvious one is the COVID airport test. Yes, we needed a test at the airports for COVID. The tests were good. But I remember calling somebody in government and I said, well, $150 per test is a lot. The person argued with me. It turned out that the person who got the contract didn't even have a registered company in Ghana. He got the contract before going to register a company. And of course, he ran that and made a lot of money. And that was why the price was so high. I can say the same thing about, for example, COVID relief money. I mean, there are people in the government who are smart enough to know that you do not mitigate COVID by sharing money to party functionaries. They knew that, but they didn't care. They were just going to share, loot and share the money. It's the same thing like going to Legon and saying that, oh, because of COVID, they are going to spray, decontaminate the place. Then they get some Legon professoriate to come and join them, and then they spray some chemicals there and poop. 500 million Ghana cedis is gone.
Now, of course, you have mentioned COVID and the treatment of that. We have a recent crisis on our hands in the Volta region. There are people who are seeking to say that this is equal to the times where some of us could not go to work because of the situations there. I'm talking about the dam spillage and the dealings with that. What lessons can we learn from the COVID era and the management of that particular scene and implement in this particular dam spillage situation that we find ourselves, which is basically rendered indisplaced and as victims more than 26,000 Ghanaians in these regions, yeah?
Well, I mean, first, I think that forming an interministerial committee actually is a good idea. I hope that they will do the work like the president said without regard to partisanship. I also hope that they will get more technical people involved. But more to the point, I think that a lot of these things will react after the fact. We need to be more proactive. It may be that some of those people could have been warned and steps could have been taken maybe to get them out of harm's way quicker. So I think the committee is good. It should work in a non-partisan fashion, but we should be more proactive and do things ahead. And unfortunately, the president's comment there was very bad about not going there because of politics and all that. I actually have been disappointed in the president for some time, but this was a low of his lows.
But it has been explained, I'm sure you have seen the clarification that this was just part of a longer statement about why government intervenes and government not considering people's votes before they intervene.
The explanations fall short. This was not the time to talk about partisanship. It's not just the president. This is a man who has been president for 6 years already, and he's getting to 80 years. He's not a kid. You know, you don't go, I mean, can you imagine if something like this had happened in Ashanti region and John Mahama as president had gone to make such a joke? Can you imagine how people will react? This is unbelievable. The president never should have referred to politics in his remarks. And whenever you joke in these circumstances, you should poke fun at yourself, not at people who already have lost everything and are in distress, because it wasn't a good joke. He was mocking their circumstances.
Well, I mean, of course, as I said, that explanation has been given. But can we, beyond what is happening on the ground, because you're a doctor, can I explore that particular issue of health with you? There are those who are relating the health angle that this should be declared as a national emergency so that we can deal with it as a humanitarian crisis the way it ought to be dealt with, getting help from external bodies who are willing to help us deal with this problem. At least we are counting beyond 26,000 currently.
Agreed completely. I mean, health is fundamental. I think first there should be shelter, there should be safety, then there should be health, and then of course, food. And I think that the Ghana Medical Association is right that the president erred in not including the Minister of Health in the interministerial committee that he has formed. Health should be central, and I think we should reach out to external sources for help sooner rather than later.
The comparison has already started about how, let's say, a country like the USA, of course, with the resources and all of that differences there, would have dealt with a similar problem. Can you shed some light on that briefly?
Yes, and actually, interestingly, there was a problem in Hawaii, when fire destroyed a lot of homes on one of the islands. And within hours, the federal government was on the ground. The president declared a state of emergency and resources were pouring into Hawaii. Obviously, to be fair, Ghana is not the United States, so we don't have resources to the extent that they do. But at the minimum, we should prioritize life, safety, and food for the people who are in extremis. And I think that in addition to appealing to external sources, we should also ask diasporan Ghanaians to see if they can contribute to assisting our brethren in the Volta region.
You have tried to bring to the fore an issue that suggests that we do not support, as a country generally, the people who are patriotic, who will put down their lives for this country. You went into history. You have mentioned the Harley the Jewels of Ties Past. You mentioned some other military people too. And recently you've drawn in the Professor Frimpong Boatengs of this world. Is it a Ghanaian trait, or is just a few people in government that appear to alienate the people who are patriotic, or it's all of us in the Republic who are of this particular nature?
I think it is a few people in government who do that because it is in their selfish interest to, in effect, sideline and victimize those who are trying to hold them to account or to expose their nefarious activities. But the truth of the matter is that the rest of us too are too apathetic when these people are, in effect, getting their comeuppance from the corrupt and the wicked. Because I think that religious leaders ought to stand up behind people like Frimpong Boatengs and give them encouragement. Yeah, organizations like TUC and NUCS, because we all talk idealistically. I think that my all-time favorite song is Ephraim Amus, Yanarai Assassin. It is anyhow, so many years before independence, he presaged the problems that will befall us, talked about Nimdien Tuaso and Pesemin Kuminya and all those things, exactly like it was going to happen. So I yearn for men like him and people who will respond to the stirring lyrics that he brings up, and it comes from all walks of life. Chief Nekwabna Bone, whose leading of the riots led to even independence, which is why I think that to the extent that we need a big six, we don't have the right big six. He should have been one of the big six, but that is a conversation for another time.
That's interesting. Yes, you're making the point, sir.
Yes, I think that when you look through our history, there have always been people who have been trying, and whenever people like that step up, unfortunately, they don't get support, they don't get encouragement, The students of Ghana, in the 70s, together with the professional bodies, in the 1980s, what I call the greatest generation of students that I led in our demonstrations, people like in the professional bodies, people like Reverend Samoa, Bishop Sapon, these were people who we should have harnessed, There was a time, for example, when newspapers like the Legon Observer were the most influential newspapers in the country, the pioneer. In those days, something like what Frimpong Boatengs disclosed would have made the front page of every newspaper in Ghana.
Yes, you took on the media too. You are of the opinion that the media is part of the silence situation that's supposed to be happening in the country. But is that a reflection of the entirety of the space, or you think it's the majority of the people that are not doing so?
Oh, it's the majority. I mean, to say it's the entirety of the space will not be fair. I actually think Joy FM, for example, when we talk about the Galamsey issue, have done some brave documentaries, and I think we should commend them for that. A few other media outlets have done that, For example, Efia Pukua has done some stirring editorials and interviews. So to say that all the media, I have seen Samson Ladi do some very good issues in terms of discussion. So to say it is all of the media will be unfair, but it is a majority of the media. And I think the pendulum has shifted. It used to be that there was more in the media who were patriotic and saw their place as beside the silent masses, saw themselves as voices for the masses. And I think these days, too many in the media are more inclined to, in effect, feed themselves than speak for the masses.
Really?
Yes.
Is that a reflection of the general attitude of Ghanaians, or it is a certain level of decay that's really attached the media? Is it to do with ownership? Is it to do with the personal values of the people? Or is just a time that is past and a new period where you can't really find patriotic people serving in any space?
A combination of all of them. To be fair, when I was a young man, I used to think that the only danger to free media was oppressive governments. I was very naive. I know that there are a lot of private forces, either because of wealth, either because of culture, either because of other unexplainable things, who wield a lot of influence among the media. So there are multifarious facts, and sometimes too people get discouraged. People like Azuri Awuni, for example, got into trouble with the government, had to leave. So when things like that happen to people, and like I said earlier, they don't feel support from the generality of the public, then that, whoa, maybe I should be careful. And there are always people on the side whispering in your ears about how you are jeopardizing your future and you should take care of yourself. The reason why when I was a student leader, I did all what I did was that I had solid support. I remember when I returned from exile, there was general celebration all on campus. It didn't matter whether it was Volta or Commonwealth or whatever. The student front was solid and united, and we taught not party, because at that time there were even no parties, but we actually resonated to my country it is of thee. We were patriots, and I think unfortunately it will find that kind of attitude among the ranks of our students today.
Now, we'll come back to you, but ladies and gentlemen, my guest with me in this conversation is Dr. Arthur Kennedy. He's a medical doctor in the USA, but he's been very active in Ghanaian politics for a very long time, from student leadership to even contesting as MPP presidential hopeful in times past. And we're discussing this because he recently penned down some quite interesting but damning verdict on the Republic of Ghana, which is being titled Our Broken Ghana. So is that level of appreciation, understanding of what went into that writing? That's the crux of our conversation. After this break, we'll explore further and be asking him to solve the problems that are in this country in a way that we can actually hold him to it to after the break. You're welcome back to UpFront. My name is Raymond Acquah. So he recently, and he writes a lot, that's without doubt. He's been an activist for almost all his entire life anyway. I recall his book, Chasing the Elephant into the Bush. He's my guest, and tonight we are taking a hard look at a more recent statement he's written, which has really gone viral. It's titled Our Broken Ghana, by former MP presidential hopeful Dr. Arthur Kennedy. And in that impassioned commentary, he paints a very dark picture of Ghanaian society and governance today. We've been exploring that. We've been going through what's been happening with corruption in this country, the very things that he thinks we should do to turn the corner, the apparent, if it's not calm or silence on the front of, he considers the media and other people who used to speak up in times past. An area he reminisces a lot about what was happening previously and what is happening now, and why so many people appear to have gone silent on the ills of society today. That's the conversation I'm actually having it with Dr. Kennedy. You're welcome back, sir.
Thank you.
Now, I wanted to move on from this point, but it's good to reminisce and reflect on our future or our past to be able to inform the future that we want as a people. But some people say when we are doing that, we are caught within the devil in the high place. Because in all fairness, societies evolve. Is it your view that this society is not evolving for the better and that with time we have become worse off?
Yes, it is my very firm view. People say that we evolve, but when we evolve, we should learn from history. You remember when I said that our problem is not ideas. The models of development are littered all over history, both our own and as well as that of others. People talk about Lee Kuan Yew's from third to first world. There is Mahathir Mohamad, a doctor in the house, transforming Malaysia. There is the PAC transforming South Korea, and a lot of other places, even in the United States. And so there are models there. I believe that our problem is not the models. We have a crisis not of ideas, but of the spirit, that we are not patriotic enough. We don't think enough. We are not inclusive enough. We don't have people with largeness of spirit. We need, in my view, to have at the table all strands. And actually, I wrote an opinion piece a few weeks before this one that also went viral, and I called it The Need for a National Movement. In that, I felt that what is happening on the streets is very reflective of the deep-seated angst and frustrations of our society. And not only that, that just didn't happen. Actually, over the last about 20 years, Afrobarometer polls have shown an increasing percentage of Ghanaians who are dissatisfied with both the MPP and the NDC. By now, it's up to about 40%. And in this year, in our current crisis, I think probably might crest 50%. It means people are very unhappy. I believe that one of the things that patriots need to do is to try and convene what I call a national conference, in which we'll have representatives from the TUC and students and markets and those marching on the street to have a candid conversation about what is ailing Ghana, so that we can distill a set of values about things that we need done. How we can get young people to work, how we can reform our constitution that seems to have become an obstacle, how we can include diasporans in our national life, how we can reform state institutions, electoral commission, auditor general's department, how we can give parliament its independence from corrupt executive authority, all those things. And when we do those things, it might launch us onto where all of us in our hearts feel Ghana ought to be going.
Now, that's interesting. You did actually bring forth other issues. You mentioned education as one of the areas that we are deteriorating. I mean, this is coming on the heels of the President of the Republic of Ghana stating categorically that his government has actually spent more in the area of education. In fact, he moved on to say that under the free SHS program, for example, the passes are way better than what used to be the case in 2016. How come you have a different assessment of the realities of education in the Republic of Ghana than what the president, who says he's privy to all the data, appears to be telling us?
Money does not necessarily correlate with quality. And the Americans will always tell you that Americans spend more per capita on both education and health than almost any other country, and yet they don't have the best of those systems. So the fact that you throw in money at a problem doesn't mean you are solving it. So let's talk about Ghana's education. I think that fundamentally, we have a foundational problem, we have a mid-level problem, and we have a top story problem. Our foundational problem is the kids who are going to JSS before they get to SHS. I went to Saito, and I'm proud of that. And I ended up in medical school. These days, it will be very hard for any kid to go to Saito and end up there. One of the hidden crises in this country is that a majority of those who end up going to SHS are from private schools. Why? Because as Ghanaians, we have normalized checking out of public problems.
Okay.
If the public schools are, find a private school for your kid, then your kid will end up into SHS. Go and look at the JSS. Joy FM is very good at doing that. Go find out what is happening in our public elementary schools. They are basically warehouses. And I tell people that you go to my district, sometimes there are years when from the JSS level, virtually nobody passes. And the next day, everybody will pick their kente and go to the market or go to the farm like nothing has happened. So that's the foundational problem. Now let's talk about the SHS problem that the president pretends that he has solved. We wasted a lot of money for nothing. In the US here, 95% of kids attend high school staying at home. Why? Because it's cheaper. Because a lot of the reason why we're spending so much money and we're struggling and this system they built up is going to collapse for lack of money is because it is just unreasonable. I loved going to boarding school. It was wonderful. But I think we need to be practical. I think that when you look at Accra, Kumasi, Cape Coast, Takoradi, and a few of the big cities, you can actually have a very robust system of day schools where buses can pass through neighborhoods and pick kids in the morning, take them to school, bring them back home. It means that we all of a sudden don't have to worry about accommodation. Of course, if I say that I'm an Odadie or I'm an Ohineba because I went to KES and I want my kid to go to Presec and I'm prepared to pay for it and there are a few boarding facilities and I want to pay, then let me pay for it because in the US here, there are actually private high schools, some of which are more expensive than most public universities. And people pay for their go there so that their kids will get better chances of getting to the Ivy Leagues and all that. Yes, if you have money, we should let you do that. But I think a majority of our senior high school education should be day students. Now, that is that. So let's go to the university. Remember I said foundation.
The foundation, yeah.
The universities are not producing the people we need. Why? Because we have a nation that needs certain skill sets to develop. And yet we are using limited public resources to produce university graduates who are unemployable. That right there is a problem. We need business and government and the universities to huddle together and say, what are the skills that we need? We need to go back to where university teach you skills that are so essential that when you leave, you almost are guaranteed a job. But that's not what is happening. I think we need to reorient our education so that our scarce resources go into producing people who can help build the country we need.
Now, you also mentioned infrastructure. I mean, governments over the period has actually told us about how they have pumped a lot into infrastructure. We've been talking about roads. This government says it's done more roads than any government in the history of Ghana. And it actually references the feeder roads. It has done over 40 kilometers or so across the country as part of the very big things that's supposed to be happening. We have always had a huge budget for capital expenditure. So why do you say there's a deterioration in that space particularly? It's not keeping up with our population?
That plus maintenance, plus shoddy work, which can be traced back to corruption. A lot of the roads, I remember one of the lowest points in my education is when I told somebody that I don't understand why the universities that are supposed to produce people to lead the country, blah, blah, blah. And he says, Atake, the universities are some of the most corrupt institutions in Ghana. And when he explained to me, I understood him. He took me to go see a building in Cape Coast, built by the university, 2 years old, and it was coming apart because there is no accountability. The people in the university have also learned from larger societal norms, and they too are in the business of loot and share. Just that everybody is doing his nicely. It's the same thing. You go to the healthcare sector, we have a national health insurance scheme that is honored in the breach. Kolebu and Rage and others are openly not accepting the national health insurance. I think either Joy or one of these stations did a documentary on that. Yeah. And nobody said, nobody will hold the leaders of those hospitals to account. Those things go round and round. So infrastructure, yes, infrastructure is very good and it helps. And a lot of good things have been done. For example, John Mahama's expansion of Kotoka International Airport was very good. He built Ridge Hospital. And Nanado has also done some infrastructure. Yeah. But most of the time, the prices are inflated. When we finish it, there is no maintenance. We allow these things to decay. Actually, let me give you a very classic example. Since the time of Rawlins, Kufuor, Mills, all through, every government borrows money to do public housing. Yeah. Somehow they build up to 80%, they leave office. When the next government comes, they decide that no, instead of doing what anybody with common sense would do, complete the one that is 80%, and they go for new money to start their own. And they do it to 80%, then the next government, and we have a bunch of public housing projects littered all over the country. I remember when Rawlins was leaving office, they purchased, I think, 140 SUVs for the district assemblies. When Kufuor's government came, they decided that the contract was riddled by corruption, so they were investigating. They investigated till the vehicles sat and rotted. A lot of stuff like that happens.
Now, you also mentioned that, and in this conversation, it's one of the issues you mentioned, that we needed a national movement to get us out of this problem, and that people are disillusioned with the NPP-NDC duopoly. Is Mr. Chemantin's movement for change the solution?
It is one of the potential solutions, but I thought that his departure was a little premature, but it is one of the potential solutions. I think that his exit from the MPP underlines the decadence in the party and the fact that it is responding to a public yearning for new approaches to how we do things. I think that fundamentally, Ghanaians have our heads buried in the sand about our political parties. I believe, and I will do so till I draw my last breath, that corrupt political parties can never beget honest governance. It is just axiomatic because people go and borrow money, they buy the votes. When they get there, they have to find money to go. So we need to make sure that our parties have transparent election processes in which people are not buying votes. It's not just our parties. We saw the last time we had DCEs elected, people claimed that they had gone to pay monies and they were not voted for. People were buying the DCMMC elections. So why is it that a person who honestly wants to serve the public has to buy a DCE position, MMC position?
There's a point, though, about how do we move forward? You have mentioned a proper movement for development in this country. You've also mentioned the people rising up. What will be the magic wand to get us out of our current quagmire with the politics, with the difficulties with education, and the general system you say is broken? How do we fix it with a single stroke? And how long would it take for us to do that?
It will take a number of strokes, but let's take the first one. The first one is, I think there ought to be a national consultative conference called by prominent Ghanaians with representatives from students and labor and lecturers and the streets and market women and all that, to crystallize what is it that we all think are urgent. I have my list, I'm sure you have yours, but most of those lists will overlap. That is one of them. The second thing is that once they have this agenda, they should invite all those in the political space vying for office to sign up for that agenda. And if they can't get them to sign up, then the movement should run a candidate to try and push the agenda. If some of them sign up, and there are interesting possibilities. For example, if you broaden Alan's movement, he might be a good vehicle for change. John Mahama, if he wins, is going to be there for only 4 years. He might decide that he had had a conversion on the road to Damascus and he will be a transformational historical president with his one term and form a government of national unity, rallied around the agenda agreed by the people. All those are options. Once we get the power vehicle, then the first thing is reform the political parties to make it inclusive, including the diasporans being able to vote and being able to contest for office. I don't understand why we face the rest of the world with one of our hands tied behind our backs. You know, all Ghanaians, regardless of where they are, ought to be allowed to contribute. We need to look at job creation, lower taxes, and we need to fight corruption. I think that we need, in effect, decapitate all the corrupt institutions and have new people and new attitudes. We need to empower the public, and we need altruistic leaders, starting with the president.
Doc, there is the presumption, and I mean, this accusation, I'm sure you have to answer to it. Some say some of your verdicts on how this government has run is because right from the time you wrote Chasing the Elephant into the Bush, you have not been a very good fan of the president, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. Is this a personal vendetta?
No, it isn't. And actually, those who say that are misinformed. Remember, even as recently as 2016, when people started saying that Nana Akufo-Addo was too old, I wrote an impassioned defense of age in politics and cited him. And if you Google it, you will see that. When they finished the elections and they were saying they were dilly-dallying, I said he had won, let's give it to him. About 2-3 years into his government, when people started asking me, I gave him credit for fixing the Dabon problem. I thought the free SH was a good idea that was executed wrongly. I thought that African Free Trade Zone was a good thing.